Okay, YouTube, it is time to put this thing back together. I'm not very good at this. This is my first time reassembling this, so this is not going to be a very efficient video, but there isn't one up, so I figured I'd go ahead and film it. So the first step here is going to be putting the spring back in. It goes back up in this channel in the rear here and is held in by this small pin. So my plan is to get this pin started and then try to get the leaf spring in position. Alright, I'm going to see if I can find a roll pin that I can start in from the other side just to kind of hold that spring in place while I push the actual pin through. Probably not. Maybe. All right. Awesome. Okay, I hope you guys can see what I just did. I installed this little leaf spring back here with this pin. Okay, the next thing is the hammer and mainspring. Bagged all these little parts up. I need to put the small tail back in. Guessing it was in there this way. There's this little pin. Tighter than I expected. Gotta make sure that is perfectly flush. And it is. So that's your little tail, and that's what pushes down on the female part of the mainspring plunger. There you go. That little tail sits down in there. Let's see. You can see the hole down in there. That's where your mainspring goes. Top. So I am going to take the sear back out and start with the hammer instead. I have already placed the hammer spring and plunger down in the hole. And this part is going to be difficult. Now this pin here is what goes into the left side of the frame and holds the hammer in. Sorry. So I'm going to have to insert this hammer, making sure I get this little tail down in that plunger, the female part of that plunger. Compress all that and then push this pin in somehow. And it's going to be very tough to do this on the camera. I ditched the gloves, there's just no way. And I launched the cup. Okay guys, I finally got that hammer back in. I have disassembled and reassembled a lot of surplus pistols, and that was one of the most difficult things I've ever run into, just because that little foot on the hammer, there's a bunch of space in here on either side of your mainspring, and as you're trying to force that hammer down and keep that little tiny foot in place, it'll just snap to one side or the other every time, and there's nothing you can get in there with to hold the pressure off of that mainspring. So I just had to keep trying and keep trying. I finally got it. I put the gun in a vise and you know, basically just held the hammer and pushed it down in, trying to balance that little foot in that the female side of that mainspring plunger. So if you go to do this, have fun with that. Maybe I'm an idiot and I overlooked a really easy way to do it. You know, who knows. But it's done, finally. So now I'm going to put the sear back in. Make sure you get this leaf spring behind the back of the sear. So it's going to be between the rear of the grip and the back side of the sear. Putting a slave pin in to hold that in place. Alright. This ought to go pretty smoothly after that part. Check that out. First. Second. Alright, the next step is to hold the hammer back as far as it'll go and insert the safety at the 1 o'clock position. Ooh. Okay, now I got the safety in place, and so I'm going to install the plunger and spring, which goes into the hammer pin here, and I'm going to have to hold that down and rotate the safety up. Fold that down. This is something that looks like it'd be really easy to launch across the room. Got it. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is replace this interrupter, disconnector, whatever you want to call it. The frame is slotted here. See the notch on the bottom? That goes inside the frame and at the bottom. A little tricky. There we go. That just slides up in there. Okay guys, sorry I didn't film the installation of the trigger, but if you look on YouTube for any installation videos or reassembly videos for the full-size Star Model B, it's the exact same. Basically, you insert this disconnector up in this slot, and then you have to bring the trigger in through this opening here and wedge it up in there. It's really tough to do, But you can't go in from the top, you can't bring it up from the bottom. I tried that, and once I finally saw somebody was able to get it in from the side, you just, a lot of trial and error, and you can finally get it. And you got to make sure that little notch on the trigger bar is what is pushing back on your sear there. That's the back of your sear. And then once you get it up in there, you're just going to put this pin back in. So I apologize for not filming that, but you can get some footage of it if you look on some other people's videos for the full-size star bead. Now I'm going to put the magazine catch assembly back together, which you have this little screw plunger type of deal, little spring, and the actual magazine catch itself. Spring goes down inside there. This little plunger goes in, and then you have to push it down in there and turn. There we go. And we're going to put this back in the gun here. Okay. There's a little slot inside the frame that you have to line the notch up with. There we go. You got to go clockwise with the little screw. Okay, this little piece here, sorry I don't know what it's called, but that is what the slide stop butts up against. It screws into this small hole here. And then what I'm going to do is put a rubber band around this and then use pliers to tighten it so that I don't mar anything. So that's in there. Now besides the grip, the frame is pretty much done. Okay, on the extractor, there's a small spring that goes underneath it into the slide. You'll see there's a circular hole milled down into this channel where that spring sits. Then you just push your extractor in on top of it, hold down on the spring tension. And I took a smaller roll pin that I had just in a box of parts, something easy to place down in there, and I stuck it through so you can see how I can wobble that back and forth. And now that's going to act as a slave pin to keep this extractor lined up while I hammer in the actual pin. That's just a little trick that can help you keep from sending things flying across your floor. So as I'm pushing the regular pin in, it's going to push this roll pin out the bottom. And now I've got this almost all the way in, and I do not want to scratch anything, so I have a few options. Sometimes I will put electrical tape all the way around this, or you can try hammering it in with a dowel, like a wooden dowel, which I'm going to try first. I don't know, this may, yeah, that's getting it. and then you can press on the back of the extractor to make sure it's able to tilt a little bit, because it's got to tilt to make its way around the rim of the case. Okay, now I'm going to do the firing pin. It goes into the slide like this with the spring in front here. Then you have your firing pin, retaining pin, which goes under the rear sight into this hole here. But there's a channel that runs down in the slide here, and you have to line that up with the notch in your firing pin. This thing has a tapered end that goes down. So you're going to have to get something to hold this, hold the firing pin in while you hammer this retaining pin in. Alright, so I got it started. It's enough to hold the firing pin in place. I'm going to hammer that down flush. I'm going to push in the back here and make sure the firing pin moves freely and that it protrudes inside. So now my rear sight with the notch facing forward is going to go in from the back left. This is quite loose. I may end up actually putting some Loctite under this, but you want to line those notches up. Now I'm going to put the grips back on the frame. Make sure you get the right size screwdriver when you're putting these in. You don't want to mar up your grip screws. I might get some wood grips eventually, but they're kind of expensive. I don't know if it's really worth spending on this particular gun since it's so pitted. The screw is not wanting to start. There we go. Alright.